Welcome to Mork Unfiltered, folks. Today's guest is a truly global and purpose-driven leader, Barbara Martin Coppola. She is the former CEO of Decathlon, the world's largest sporting goods retailer, where she spearheaded a bold transformation towards digital innovation, sustainability, and impact. Before that, Barbara held senior leadership roles at IKEA, Google, Grubhub, and Samsung, shaping the future of consumer and tech industries across 3 continents. Barbara is also a proud graduate of INSEAD and now serves on its board, joining the ranks of past guests, including Adam Goldstein, in guiding the school's mission to develop leaders who want to make a difference. She's been recognized by Fortune magazine as one of the most powerful women in business and was also appointed a Chevalier Knight of French National Order of Merit by the President of France. Born French, American, and Spanish, Barbara represents the very essence of global leadership and values-driven change. She and I go way back to our early days at Google when I was running marketing for Play and she was leading YouTube marketing. So it's a genuine honor to welcome her to the show today. Barbara, welcome to Mork Unfiltered.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
To start off, obviously, when we go back to those early days and you think of your time at Google and reflect on those moments, what stands out for you professionally and personally from your time at Google? I mean, so many people aspire to work at Google, look at YouTube, look at Google as a place to work, kind of as a role model in the technology industry. What stands out for you professionally and personally from your time there?
My time at Google was 7 years. And in 7 years, I had 5 different jobs. That's the first thing. And it's a testament to how fast things were changing at Google. I started in France and started with one job, then got a global marketing job for, marketing job for France, and then global roles at Mountain View. What stands out was a real sense of unlimited possibilities. The fact of actually creating a new way of consuming, of media, of expressing, of sharing knowledge, and the fact of working with people that were not taking themselves too seriously, but they were really smart and wanted to make a difference in creating things that were serving people. I met incredible people. Everybody was so smart that, if you doubted on 1 millisecond on an idea, somebody else would do it. And so the sort of like flip side of that is the possibilities were so multiple and so big everywhere that overachievers could actually exhaust themselves in taking projects too. And so there was, a sort of like discipline and self-management to stay a little bit focused and actually, do what you needed to do and go beyond, because nobody would actually set limits without accumulating projects, which was very possible, and ending sort of exhausting yourself.
With so many different opportunities, in the company and so many cool things to do, how did you go about prioritizing and focusing on what really was interesting to you, apart from the things that you had to do in the day-to-day?
Well, I had a major reason to prioritize, and it was that I became a mom. And so at some point, I decided that I was going to leave work at 5 every day to be with my kid and then with my kids, because I had my 2 kids while at Google. I remember in Paris, I was rushing in the subway to go see my kid. And because if not, if I came later, then my baby will be asleep. And so that's what I was doing. And it was the biggest forcing function to use the time at the office in the right way. When my baby was asleep, I will work again. And I've actually done that since they were small. So now they're 15 and 13. So imagine it's been a long time in different companies, and I've kept that. So I've managed to, very much perform and be a mom at the same time, which was and still is a pillar of happiness of mine. And so that was the biggest forcing function. And then, you are measured at Google on your performance. And so you start seeing whether the results are really good as you want them to be or less good. When you have too many things and too many projects, the whole comes down. And so it's a very sort of, rational way to also slow it down a little bit. Not slow it down, but prioritize it a little bit.
Tell us a little bit about that, because, I'm not a woman, obviously. I'm a father. My kids are very important to me. You and I, before the show, were talking about values. And, on my window here, I have 4 Post-it notes with my values written there to remind me always. And one of mine is the good father. And maybe you remember this. I mentioned this in my book. But I can imagine that it must be much more challenging for women to balance the professional side of their journey with being a mom, right? How were you able to, in a way, say no to some of the pressures that would show up at work when, maybe people were indirectly asking you to stay late or travel or commit to something that might force you to compromise on those values? I think many women that I've coached struggle with that. There's this constant guilt of, I should be working, but I also want to be a good mom. How did you manage that?
It's not easy. The incredible network opportunities that I have not been to, the amazing presentations and conferences that I could have done that I haven't, because they were additional, and it was important to stay home with my kids. But at the same time, anytime that I was traveling maybe too long, I started to feel it almost physically. I was like, what am I doing? And so if you are aware of what you need in order to stay grounded and to stay happy as a whole human being, then, for me, it was important to, find this time with my kids almost every day. Now, to be perfectly honest, during the early years, it was really about work and about my family. I didn't have a lot of time about myself. So, and this is something that now they are grown up, and so I can have time to exercise more, meditation, dancing, music, things that I love. But early days with my kids, it was really very much, working them. I had pretty much zero time for myself. Now, it was my choice, and the sort of professional life that I chose was so fulfilling. It was like all these fantastic people making a difference in the world, learning and growing. And so work was not just work. It was a way of growing oneself in a way that was really fulfilling and discovering the world and bringing things to the world. And so at the end, the whole was very positive, even during these early days when I was a mother.
For the audience, though, especially for the women out there listening, when you want to strike that balance of, being really good at what you do, advancing your career, doing great work, doing a great job at your work, but also being a good mother, being a good spouse, being present for your family, are there practical, tips or techniques that you can share about, how can a woman be assertive in terms of making sure that people understand the boundaries without coming across as, a dragon lady or a witch, which is sometimes how women can get characterized when they try and be assertive, right? I'm just speaking from what women have told me, because obviously this doesn't apply to me, but what can women do practically to make sure that people understand how important their families are, make sure that people understand that spending time with their kids is important? What can they do practically speaking?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. I think the first one is choose the environments where you decide to spend your time in. So the fact of choosing Google and then working for IKEA and for Decathlon, was actually very deliberate. It's because these places would allow me to be judged on my performance and not the time that I was spending at the office. And therefore, it was on my terms. I could work from home. I could work in the office. I could leave at 5, and it was okay because I would deliver and I would exceed actually what was expected from the performance point of view. The second thing, I had, other women around me, and I wasn't the only one. So, somehow it actually helps as well to see other women saying, hey, I'm leaving. Now, I was the first one in Google France, and that was a bit of a shock to the system because I was in the executive team of Google France. I was the only mother and the only woman. And so I did have comments on, hey, are you leaving early? From quite a lot of people. But then it was my choice. And somehow I resisted the urge of saying, no, I'm going to conform because it was just way too important to me to see my little one. And so at the end, it opened the door to other women. And it opened the door to more, people saying, hey, I need this at work, outside of work, and it was okay. So I would somehow, listen to yourself and give yourself permission. Because at the end, nothing happened. It was just a couple of comments, but it opened the door to a lot more happiness for other people. So I'm so glad that I resisted a little bit the sort of fitting in the box and fitting the way things had been. And now there's a lot more women and a lot more mothers, and it's totally okay.
You mentioned briefly before the show that before going to Google, you were at Samsung, and that you were one of the first women executives, and that your boss was, one of the first women VPs. That's such a different culture. What was that like? I mean, when you compare Samsung to Google to later Decathlon, what were some of your struggles or challenges, in that role in Samsung?
Samsung was, to me, a school for life because the fact of being extremely different than a minority makes you reflect about yourself quite a bit. So indeed, I was part of an organization and there were 2 white people. And so we were minority. The fact of reporting to the first woman VP in the history of Samsung Electronics was also outstanding because she was minority too in that level, right? And so what I learned a lot of things. The first one was that I was never going to be Korean. And so somehow I could respect the culture. I could very much try to adapt to some cultural norms, but I was going to stay myself. And that difference could be turned into a positive. And when I give myself again this permission mentally of saying, okay, so I might voice, my opinions in a little bit different way, but that's okay because I'm not expected to behave as a Korean. And that resulted actually in getting projects that were a little bit more risky, that some Korean people didn't want to take because they would stay for a lifetime at Samsung. And I had nothing to lose. And so I remember I did a memory project and it was, by far the profit machine of the company, the semiconductors, and working with these people. It's sort of like working with like the stars at Samsung. And doing a transformation project for them was a big deal. And again, behind the titles and behind all of that, you found really nice, smart people with whom you could connect with a lot of respect, respecting the hierarchy, but still say things and take a little bit of positions. So I think it was a reaffirming time for my personality and for what I could be somehow, even being different. And that helped me then when I came back to the West and I started working for Google and other companies, since, okay, there were not a lot of women executives either, but, I was kind of used to being minority then. And so why not continuing with that and giving it a shot authentically?
It's super interesting because you've got this rare blend, I think, of, culturally, you're Spanish, you're kind of American, you're kind of French. You have experience working all over the world. You've worked with fast moving technology companies and then, private French retail companies, right? Like very different worlds. How do you think that kind of global identity has shaped the way that you lead and connect with people?
I think of myself sometimes as a little bit of a chameleon. So you sort of change and blend with what, the environment requires. Now, there is always a core of Barbara and values and personality that stays. But then there is also a modulation. For instance, like the communication, I can be extra direct, but I can also be a lot more indirect. And I understand both. I understand when people are actually inferring things instead of saying things. The fact of spending time in Korea teaches you to actually listen to the nonverbal communication. And so here you go. You see so much going on. And when you feel these things, there's a lot that you can use in order to be effective or to connect better with people. And so all this different mosaic of experiences, actually, I take them as enriching my personality as a leader, as a person, to be better at what I do. And so I could choose to say I'm super confused because I don't know what I am. And then I choose to say it's actually great because
it's actually great. It's actually great.
Yeah, I can connect with more people.
Right. No, it's amazing because, we live in such a diverse world that really, if you want to run a global company, I don't see how you cannot take that approach, right? But yet, we see so many examples of CEOs who, not to typecast or stereotype anybody, but, people who come with a very set mentality from their country of origin, and they really insist on running a global company in a way that fits the culture of the country of origin. And it's so apparent, and it doesn't necessarily work in many other parts of the world. Right. So that for me is something that's very interesting. I want to switch for a second to something that you talk about a lot. And I remember reading so many of your posts when you were at Decathlon, and I was always like one of your number one fans, jumping up and down when you would post things. But talk to me a little bit about your sense of purpose, because when you were at Decathlon, I remember you talking a lot about impact, a lot about sustainability, from all the content and the initiatives that I saw coming out of Decathlon, like, shoes and things made of recyclable material and other initiatives that you had. How important is it to work in an organization or be able to lead an organization that has a sense of mission and purpose that just goes beyond, the financial goals, which are the things that are sadly most often talked about? How important is that to you, and why is that important to you?
It is incredibly important because without that, I don't think that I put like even half of what I can bring to the table. The purpose is, it goes beyond work, is what legacy do you leave behind? Is how do you look at your kids' eyes and say, I did my best to leave you a world that is worthy of you. So it's actually really profound. As a philosophy of life, is somehow looking back and saying, did I do what makes me proud? And did I do it in a way that I'm proud? So all of that combined means that, if I have the responsibility and the opportunity of leading a large organization, then I'm going to do it so that it serves, of course, the economic part of the company. Without that, there is no purpose possible. But you can do this in a way that it serves societies and the planet at the same time. And when you do that, I think the value creation is multiplied. I think then you can very much actually not only create a wealth of goodness in terms of loyalty of your customers, but you can get your employees to be very engaged and proud and actually go through also a transformation and maybe a bit of a reinvention with much more strength than, if you didn't have that light and that purpose, there. Now, the thing is that for all of this to work, it needs to be authentic, or it's like it doesn't work. And so you don't invent a purpose and stick it on the wall and go like, that's it, we've got values. And I think people see through that. This is, it's either through the heart or it doesn't work. And so I think you prove it through action, and you prove it through, all the different things, how you talk, but also how you actually run the business and the results of the company and how the company decides to actually do things. And then if it's real, I think people connect to it, and it's even more powerful, because then you've got an example as well out there of doing business while doing good. And I think the world needs more examples like that.
It's super interesting because, I speak a lot on stage, as you know, and one of the keynotes that I've been giving lately is, a keynote called Becoming Unstoppable. And in that keynote, I talked about 5 different pillars of resilience, because resilience is such an important aspect of people being able to see through a change, right? We always talk about people don't change because they're scared and because there's fear, right? And oftentimes it seems like fear is the reason people don't start change, but a lack of resilience sometimes is the reason why people don't finish it when they start it. And so I'm just curious, when you think about the importance of the reason of how important it is for people to be resilient in a company where you're trying to make a profound and oftentimes quick change, how big a part does having a clear purpose like you had at Decathlon, how big a part does that play in order to help people see the change through all the way to its completion?
It is so important. I think you start with a purpose and the mission. Then you set up the strategy. Then you set up the actions on change. But you want to become all the time sort of like, hey, put your head up and look at where we are going very oftentimes, because it connects you to the why. Why are we doing what we do? And it gives strength, not only rational, but emotional, to actually kind of keep going and say, okay, we are going there. Now, the path to find, in order to get to that goal, that North Star, I was calling it at Decathlon, is something that you need to create. And it's something that, is in the hands of the employees at the end of the day. And that is the path that they need to find. But it helps a lot knowing where you are going and why. And that why needs to be bigger than making money. Because I don't think a lot of people wake up and say, well, I'm so fulfilled, I created whatever X billion. I think
we improved earnings per share by X cents on the dollar.
Yeah. I think that is an outcome. Right. This is an outcome of doing the right things for the company. Then you get the growth and the earnings and all of that are great measures, but is while you are creating wealth and value for, people out there. And that's, I think, the most important.
Can you remind, for the sake of the audience who might not know that much about Decathlon, can you remind us a little bit, Decathlon's business and what Decathlon's purpose is?
So Decathlon is the 3rd largest sports company in the world, 100,000 people, around $17 billion. It hosts 80 sports under its roof. And 80% of what Decathlon sells is actually made by Decathlon. So there is 45 countries around the world that produces, all the sport equipment that Decathlon does.
And the purpose of the company was, what was Decathlon's purpose as a company?
Move people through the wonders of sport. And we went from making sport accessible to move people through the wonders of sport.
When you talk about keeping the purpose alive, like I think that's one of the biggest challenges probably that companies have with regards to purpose and values, right? It's how does that actually manifest in the day-to-day of a company? Like what kind of initiatives or what did you do as a CEO at Decathlon to make sure that people were constantly being reminded of the purpose of the company and why this mattered?
I learned a lot at IKEA because at IKEA, any presentation that, about CRM engagement conversion rates was starting with the purpose of the company. Every single presentation, it was everywhere. And so it is sort of by repetition, there is a bit of is ingrained into everything. Then the second thing is we measured actually how much the people knew the purpose and felt that they contributed to the purpose. So every quarter, we had a survey to the 100,000 employees, and we measured the fact that, they understand and they contribute and they can name it. And there were quite a bit of questions actually around that, in the pulse that we were doing every quarter. The third thing is every financial or sort of business presentation that we had, had three components. You had the financial one, you had the people part, and you had the sustainability planet part. And so in the people part, we would always look how we were living the purpose within the company. And so we would say, with the goals that we had, we would make them as important as the financial goals and the planet goals. And so at the end, you have not only this is an inspiring statement, but it's a measurement, pretty much present all the time so that people are very much relating to it and living it as part of all the activities that they do.
Because that's always the biggest challenge, right? Is that, we live in a society where constantly, what gets measured ultimately is what gets done, right? And this is why it's so easy for companies to fall on financial metrics because it's very easy to measure, right? And everybody tracks it and Wall Street tracks it and everybody understands it. So can you give an example of, metrics that, tie back to kind of purpose and culture that companies could be tracking if they wanted to get more serious about this?
We were tracking, actually, we called it the North Star. And so we were tracking the engagement towards the North Star, and we were tracking the fact of I actively contribute to the North Star. So it wasn't enough that, I like it and I'm engaged, is I contribute in my everyday to the North Star. And so we were measuring that. And it's beautiful to see when you're introducing a North Star that, we got to 91% of people saying I contribute to the North Star. And that was one of the most beautiful things, of my career was to see that, is how much of a movement and an engagement, we created around that.
How did that actually reflect itself in your recruiting practices? I mean, finding people that are really talented, have the skills, have the experience, and align culturally to a culture like Decathlon's. How do you go about instituting that in recruiting so you make sure you get people who are aligned with the purpose or who care?
I can tell you this is a tricky one. And not only at Decathlon, but I saw that at IKEA. So the cultures of both are very strong. And so it's really important actually to see whether the people can adapt culturally to the organization or not, right? And actually, when you have people that have been in the company for a very long time, then it can become a closed culture. And so it's really important to make sure that the newcomers are welcomed and that, there is a harmony, I would say, between, newcomers and people that have been around for a long time. And sometimes it is not easy to actually get that balance right. But it's essential because any company needs new ideas. Any company needs variety and diversity. If not, it's the same ideas that go on over and over again. So it's really important to open up.
Switching tacks a little bit, you've obviously had an amazing career all over the world, running very different organizations in different industries with different cultures. But, as we know, kind of like success is not a straight line, right? It's kind of always up and down and left and right. Can you share with us a little bit, maybe one of the toughest moments that you've had in your career or challenges that you faced and how it shaped you and how you dealt with that?
There's been a lot of moments, actually, of self-doubt, for instance. So bear in mind, I'm in the tech industry, digital industry, which is my home. I'm in the US. And then I'm taking a chief digital role in IKEA, different continent, different industry, different role, all at the same time. And getting there and saying, okay, I don't even know what this role is about, but let's go. And somehow actually understanding that nobody really knows what the role is about, and that it depends to the context and it depends to what the organization actually needs at that point of time. And then deciding to write the role yourself, together with the executive team and especially the CEO, who was extremely great and very helpful at IKEA, right? But then, there is always sort of like shocks coming from pure digital, coming to, an organization where digital hadn't been really prioritized. And so how to actually roll up your sleeves and going like, okay, we're going to help all we can because we believe in the purpose of this company, and this company is worth it. And doing, the maximum possible to help out. Sometimes going too fast, sometimes going too slow, and calibrating that, which, by the way, there is no one recipe. And so sometimes seeing, oh my God, I went like way too fast. And so then, all right, now we need to slow down big time but not too much, because if not, we're like completely far away from the rhythm of the market. And so it's been, a calibration in a constant way to find actually the way of being useful to the company and creating anything that we could to help out. But there are, of course, moments of ups and downs. And the important thing is that the line at the end goes in the right direction. So, it's okay to oscillate, but keep somehow, a steady line in the sense of growing and learning and becoming a better person and not losing that part, right? Because if not, it could be completely destabilizing and losing yourself. And so you don't want to do that. Yeah.
When you have those moments of self-doubt, like, take IKEA, for example, you're switching countries, you're switching industries, you're switching to this completely different role, which is not clearly defined. You have those moments of self-doubt. We all have them, right? What do you do in situations like that to push through? Do you have like rituals, techniques, people you depend on, mentors, coaches, advisors? What should people do when they have moments of self-doubt? Because we all have them. And when we're trying to do hard things, which it sounds like you've done a lot of hard things in your career, how do you get through that? What techniques can you share with people that have worked for you?
There is a couple of techniques, I think, that work for me. The first one is to slice the elephant into really small chunks. So imagine you have an Everest to climb and you go like, okay, we're going to go to this height. And in this height, we're going to slice it into super small steps that are a lot less risky and a lot less overwhelming. And even if we don't know how to do that, we're going to test it out. And so you minimize the risk to call it test, call it small things that make you advance and learn so that you can actually go further and further and assert self-confidence in the journey. That's one thing. Another thing is this notion of going to the balcony. So oftentimes I will be like, boom, very buried in a lot of different things and details and whatever. I'm like, oh my God, I cannot breathe. And so it's sort of like, boop, you go up and then you look at your life, you look at your kids, you go for a walk, you sort of think it through, you take distance. And that has always been super healthy, or even doing sport, actually, to lay it all out, to change, that sort of stuffed mind at the end. And so you have distance and you can see much more clear. So I've been trying to be less impulsive and more reflective, which is not natural for me because I'm in action all the time. And so taking those balcony moments has been a practice. And I'm getting better and better at doing that. Sport, meditation are also fantastic. For me, a sort of meditation is dancing. I love dancing. Music, and if it's with people, even better. So whatever works for you that gives you a sense of humanity and distance to, what you're doing would actually help.
Yeah, it's, I was reading in a management book the other day from the chairman of the board of a very successful company, and he was saying that he would pencil in his calendar these boxes of thinking time, like 2 or 3 times a week. He would just basically pencil in an hour where he would just dedicate time to thinking about a particular problem. And it was kind of like he would book a meeting with himself, as a way to get some distance and get some perspective. Is that something, did you ever contemplate something similar? Was that something that resonates with you?
It's something that resonates. What I try to do is my meetings are not an hour, they are 45 minutes. And so the quarter of an hour between one and the other would be the moment of going for a coffee or breathing or going outside. And so those are important moments to kind of, you close one and you go to the next one. I wasn't always great at it, but when I could, I felt that the energy at the end of the day was so much better.
Switching tacks now as we start to kind of like wind down a little bit this episode. Your role and your involvement with INSEAD. You obviously you're a graduate of the school. You've been on the board. And INSEAD has this lofty mission of really being a force for good. What was your reason for wanting to get more involved with the school, and why is the school's mission so important to you personally?
To me, the school represents a lot of the values that I wish the world embraced a little bit more. It's about respect for each other's cultures. It's about education. It's about tolerance of different views. And I wanted to give back to the school. And also because I strongly believe in education. My mother's a teacher. My sister is a teacher. My aunt is a teacher. And so I've seen it firsthand how beautiful it is to help a human being actually be better and have knowledge and experience life, with education. So that's my way of giving back and helping actually an educational institute that is dear to me. The final thing is that I hope that there is more leaders that care and that have purpose and that, build a society that is with human beings at the heart, and that, the goal is to be happy at the end. And so we need to progress for that, and not losing perspective here around greed or, going too far, as to the point of forgetting human beings in the midst of it. And so those are the reasons why I'm part of INSEAD board.
I live here in Miami, and one of the things that shocked me when I left South America after 6 years of running a startup in leadership development there and moving back here was just how focused people are on the materialist side of success, right? The cars, the clothes, the boats, the house in the Hamptons, the money, et cetera. So what you said there really resonates. I think I'd be curious, before we do our lightning round of quick questions, what your definition of success is. What does a successful life look like for you?
A successful life is a life where I've lived a lot of fulfilling experiences. I've been with people that were important to me, and I've met also, people that helped me and I helped them. So somehow having an exchange, of energy, of input, of education, of growth with people is really important to me. It's a life where I'm proud of the legacy that I leave behind, and where I can honestly look at myself in the mirror and say, I lived with my values. So I am very much a humanistic person. I believe the impossible is possible. And so somehow a challenge that people go like, impossible. Well, those are the type of things that I love getting my head around and trying to prove that we can. And so, I've been in these situations, I think, with in the business environment. And somehow I don't know what's the limit yet to what is possible. And so I continue experimenting and learning through it to become a better person and especially give and be useful to people and society.
What's next for you?
A big unknown, but with all this experience actually that I have, I'm going to be testing things that I have never done in my life before. And I'm going to give myself a bit of time to do that. There are other CEO positions that are coming. And so who knows? But I'm also, going to be doing these things that are completely new to me. And so learning through those experiences in the near months that are coming.
So in closing, I always do a lightning round, which is like 3 quick questions with very short answers, just to get your take on it. So one value you never compromise on?
Respect for people.
Okay. One book that you think every executive leading a company or a team should read?
It would be the books by Isabel Allende, who take you to all these beautiful, beautiful different worlds and somehow this magical sense of humanity that she's got.
Favorite movie?
What is the Dead Poets Society?
Movie? Yeah, sure, of course.
You know that one?
Yeah,
I
with
know
Robin
the name
Williams.
in Spanish, but not in El Club de los Poetas Desaparecidos.
Yeah, the Dead Poets Society. That's a fantastic movie. Well, look, Barbara, I know our time's up, so I really want to thank you for a rich, honest, and very inspiring conversation. Your journey has really been a masterclass, I think, in purpose-driven leadership. And a stark reminder, I think, that courage, clarity, resilience, trying things that are hard can really reshape us. Not just reshape our companies and the teams that we work with, but reshape our lives, right? And so, for everybody out there listening, if this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you think, please subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast, share it with somebody who you think might benefit. Leave us a review; those are always helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback to keep the conversation going. So, thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much, Barbara, for being here. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And until next time, folks, keep stepping back, keep leaning in, and keep working on becoming unstoppable. Thank you so much, and I will see you all next time.